honestly, I thought I was going to wait a whole lot longer before I brought this game out, but this is Dark Cloud 2 for the PlayStation 2, released back in 2003. One of my favorite games of all time, and very vivid memories of spending far too much money going to the store to rent this back when we could actually still rent stuff. Probably so much so that I probably could have just purchased it, but I enjoyed the thrill of skateboarding to the rental store and picking this up and then coming home and spending the weekend playing it. But this game matters immensely to me. And after I explain kind of the concept of what the game is, it's going to matter a lot by the end of this episode. So here's kind of the concept. The world is devastated, just like it is in most video games. Towns have been wiped out, and your job here is to rebuild them. Not just the buildings and the landscape, but the actual people who live within there. And that's kind of really where things get super interesting. You can't just drop a random person into a town and call it rebuild. The game forces you to actually know the people that you're recruiting, what they care about, what they need, what they're good at. One town might need a person who understands nature, so you recruit a gardener. One person might need somebody who understands machines, so you recruit a mechanic. Another person might need a baker. So whatever the case, you recruit the correct person. And you can't fake that relationship. The game physically won't let you. You have to have an intimate understanding of who goes where. And I picked this game for a very particular reason, because a few weeks ago, my world got a little devastated. I was, again, really hoping to have hopefully a few more episodes under my belt before I actually got to live through one of these pivots that I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about. And in the weeks since then, I've been thinking about this game a lot. And what I found out is that much like we see throughout life, art imitates life. And this game is not far off from real life. I'm Eric Peterson, and this is Pivot. And today we're going to be talking about the pivots that you don't see coming, and ultimately the people who show up when those pivots occur. Last episode, I really talked about the concept of sometimes you choose the pivot and sometimes the pivot chooses you. I introduced that idea pretty briefly and kind of just moved on. But today we're going to live in that for a little while, because about 3.5 weeks ago, on what by all accounts was an absolutely unremarkable day, I fell and broke my hip. There was no risk. There was no big dramatic buildup. There was no warning. It was just some idle Thursday, and everything changed. I was working on a ladder, talking to a friend, doing something that I had done thousands of times before, not being careless in the least bit. And the next thing I knew, I was on the floor in immense pain, bleeding profusely from the head, and very quickly discovered that something was quite wrong. And thankfully, it happened with somebody nearby, as well as somebody else from the medical field walking by at the same time. So the other part of it too is where I was. I was in a fitness area where there was a lot of stuff that I could have fallen on. Treadmills, workout benches, dumbbells, barbells, any number of things could have fallen, landed on. But I fell in the one spot where there was nothing. Exactly the size of my body fell in that one spot. So in the immediate aftermath, got myself over to the emergency room, which also just happened to be a block away. And at the time, I was really hoping that it was just going to be maybe I knocked my hip out of socket, or maybe I bruised it. But no, had a bunch of x-rays done. Doctor came back in and he said, yeah, you broke your hip and you need surgery immediately. That moment wasn't great. I was sitting in there. My wife had not made it down quite yet. My mom had made it down. Friend that I was with was still there, and I just remember laying in the emergency room, still kind of in a haze of everything that was going on, and just having this overwhelming rush of sadness because I knew what was coming. 12 years ago, I had surgery on my other hip, albeit not as dramatic. It was just a cartilage repair and shaving down some bone. This one was far more dramatic. And I knew what lay ahead for me. And in that moment, I wasn't excited, primarily because I knew the toll. I knew the toll that was going to take on me, not just on me, but on my family, my friends, and work, and my kids. And I wept because I knew everything changed in an instant, and it all came to a stop. In that moment, I understood that the only thing that mattered was getting better. Now, I really, really, really want to be clear about something before I go any further with this, is that I'm not sharing this for anybody to feel sorry for me or to get any pity, because I genuinely can't stand that energy, and I'm not going to manufacture it. But what I'm telling you here is that this experience handed me one of the clearest, most undeniable lessons that I've had in a long time, and it happened immediately. No time to prepare for it, didn't see it coming. And a lot of the pivots that I've worked through in my life have been ones that I haven't recognized until after the fact. I've been able to look back at them retroactively with hindsight and go, oh, man, that was a pivot I wasn't expecting. And you can see how you eased into it. This one just happened, and it was thrown in my face and went, here you go, deal with it. And I remember laying in the hospital room after surgery, and I was thinking about a song from the late 90s called Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen by Baz Luhrmann, which was massive when I was in high school. Not because it was particularly insightful. I mean, we were high school kids at the time. It's just a good beat. And I remember listening to it a lot, and us as naive 18-year-olds would listen to the really insightful lyrics, which at the time, this was just a graduation speech that was set to music. And thinking, well, you know what, that's all some fine and well, good advice, but what does he know? And here I am, 22 years later, looking back on the lyrics of that song, and there was one line in there that always stuck out to me, and it has to do with the concept of worrying. And he says that worrying is about as effective as trying to solve an algebra equation by chewing bubblegum. The real troubles in life are apt to be the things that never cross your troubled mind, the kind that blindside you on 4 p.m. on some idle Tuesday. And I remember thinking about that, like, yeah, I never worried about falling off of a ladder, breaking my hip, ruining work travel plans, having to cancel my family vacation out to California with the kids, and inconveniencing a whole slew of people because now suddenly I'm not able to do things. I spent my time worrying about business growth. Is this sale going to close? Is this employee going to be doing what we're expecting them to do? Are my kids going to be happy where they're at? Finance. We worry about any number of things. This never crossed my mind. And here it is being the most impactful thing that's happened to me in recent memory. And I never once even remotely considered this would happen to me. So I just caught myself sitting there thinking about that song. And I've probably thought about that lyric 1,000 times in my life. And I've never actually really felt it more viscerally than that moment in the hospital bed, realizing that my entire next several months were just completely rewritten by 5 seconds on some Thursday afternoon. And historically, I'm really good at worrying. I spent a lot of my life worrying. I've learned how to not worry as much. And we as people, we're really, really good at allocating anxiety towards things that just don't happen. The business what ifs, the relationship what ifs, the health what ifs. I know I'm not the only one who lies awake at night worrying about this stuff, but most of those, they just quietly don't happen. A lot of times they just dissolve on their own and life moves on. But my hip just wasn't on my worry list. And that's not something I saw coming. And that's really actually the point. You cannot prepare for everything. And the sooner that you make peace with that, and I don't just mean accept the fact that it's like, yeah, you know what, I can't control this or whatever, and I'll throw my hands up. But I mean, truly make peace with it and not just like say the words. You're going to be better equipped when something actually happens, when your idle Thursday shows up, because your energy wasn't burnt up worrying about all of the wrong things. So there I am, laying in bed post-surgery, limited mobility, actually very limited mobility. And the kind of the high and low of it is that I'm non-weight bearing for 6 weeks. And with it being my dominant leg, that then means can't drive. I can rest my foot on the ground if I'm sitting, but if I'm up on crutches or using my walker, I cannot rest my foot on the ground. And the first week was hell. I couldn't, I'm a side sleeper and a stomach sleeper. Couldn't sleep on my side, couldn't sleep on my stomach. So having to sleep on my back was brutal. And my house isn't particularly walker and crutch friendly. The driveway is not particularly shallow. We've got steps going into the house, and all of my favorite rooms in the house are in the basement. My game room is in the basement. My office for work is in the basement. So for several weeks, I was not able to make it down there. But thankfully, things started to happen that I was not fully prepared for, and something that hadn't really even crossed my mind. People started showing up. Not really in a vague general sense. I mean, specifically and concretely in ways that matched exactly who they are as people. I had friends reach out to me. A lot of really close friends. I've had some friends that I hadn't spoken to in years who reached out, asking if there was something that they could do, not just for me, but for my family, because they had either talked to somebody who knew of what had happened, or they had seen something that I had shared and felt compelled to reach out and say, hey, we're here for you. I had a friend who is handy show up and handle some stuff around the house. My brother-in-law came and mowed the lawn. The most impactful thing was the care and concern for my kids and my wife. We had friends show up with meals because my wife was all consumed with making sure that I was okay. We had somebody show up with a motorized recliner because getting up and out of a chair or the couch was incredibly challenging. So they brought their motorized recliner over and had somebody deliver it and hook it up and make sure that it was where I needed it to be. And that has been an absolute game changer. I had people just come and sit with me. I had one friend who our schedules have always been very challenging to align. We cross paths in a business sense, and we always try to cross paths in a more social sense, but it just never lines up. He was the first to reach out and say, we're on our way with dinner. And he and his wife and daughter showed up, and having them show up with dinner and just sit there with me for a few minutes it was humbling. Not because they felt like they had to, and not because I asked, but because that's who they are. And apparently, just like with everybody else who reached out, people who came and took my kids out for the day, and went and did stuff with them, family members who chipped in to help out around the house and supply groceries and cook meals and just kind of do the day-to-day stuff that you don't realize is so important until you can't do it. The simple act of just getting up to walk to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee was not physically possible for me. And that's who these people are. And it's who we are to each other. And I'm sitting there week 1 of recovery in my recliner, just trying to absorb what had happened. And the pain wasn't bad. That isn't what moved me. What moved me was the absolute outpouring of support. I was just laying in my chair, just genuinely moved by how many people showed up, which honestly, I think I probably shouldn't have been, but I think we spend so much time building these relationships in our day-to-day that we really forget that we're actually building something. It might not be tangible. We might not be able to put any sort of quantifiable metrics on it, but we're building something. And it just feels like living your life. It just feels like being a decent person and knowing decent people. And that's sort of what I want to talk about, because that's called relationship capital. And I want to talk about why it's so different from every other kind of capital that you'll ever build in your entire life. You have money and you have equity. Money you can obviously control when you spend it. You decide what you're buying, when you're buying it, and whether or not the timing is right. You, at the end of the day, are the one who gets to pull out your wallet, open it up, take the cash out, and say, I am exchanging this for that. Equity is a little less tangible, but the same concept still exists. You own something that's worth something, and you can see the value associated to it. Relationship capital, unfortunately, does not work in that way whatsoever. You do not get to choose when it gets spent. You don't even know if you're accruing it. You could be investing a lot of time and energy and effort into a relationship with somebody. Even if you understand the concept of relationship capital, you could be investing that time with somebody thinking that, hey, this relationship is growing and it may not pay off at all. But ultimately, you, at the end of the day, have no say on when to cash it in. Life will cash in your relationship capital on its own schedule. And that schedule does not care if it's convenient for you. It doesn't check with you first. It just shows up on that idle Thursday and says, hey, let's see what you've been building. Let's see if we can cash some of that in, which means the only real question is, did you actually build the relationship capital account before you needed it? And here's the other thing about relationships too that I think we don't take into account, is that a lot of people think that most relationships are just transactional. What can this person do for me? How do I network? How do I build the right connections? And I guess in a business sense, that's not entirely wrong. But if we're looking at this holistically, strategic relationships matter. Knowing the right people matters. And I talk about this with my kids all the time because growing up, I remember my grandfather, who was a very successful businessman, he would always share just nuggets of wisdom, a lot of it in some sort of comedic sense. But he had said to me at one point, and it's a pretty common cliche phrase. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I'm always very careful with that because I understand that can very quickly sound manipulative. And the goal of knowing people isn't to manipulate them to better your own situation. It's to truly know them and to know in a deep, genuine way the correct people. And transactional relationship is not what showed up at my door during recovery. What showed up was not my network. From a business perspective, I have a massive network of people that I know professionally. But the people that showed up at my door were my people. They are people that know me. And I think there's a stark difference there. Your network is people that know you, but your relationship capital is who actually knows you, who understands you at a more fundamental level. And this is the challenging part that we have to force ourselves to be better at, is that to build relationship capital requires input from yourself. So your relationship capital, people actually know you, and they're people that you have actually shown up for. Your network and your relationship capital people are not interchangeable. They can drift back and forth, but I would not have just been able to call up my network. You can have 1,000 contacts and 3 people who actually come and mow your lawn. And I'll take those 3 people all day. Which brings me back to this. In Dark Cloud 2, you're not just collecting people to fill space in a world that you rebuilt. You have to actually know them, what they care about, what role they can play, what they need from you before they'll show up from you. And the game, like I said, will not let you fake it. Now, it sounds super complicated, but it's not. It's a game from 23 years ago, but the fundamentals are still there. If a person doesn't want to live next door to somebody with a red roof, you're only going to know that if you know that person doesn't like the color red. It's just simplistic things like that, but it forces you to learn about people. And when I think about the people who showed up during these past few weeks, every single one of them showed up in exactly the way that I knew them. There were no surprises in who they were. The surprise was just seeing it all at once. Seeing the account that I'd quietly been building for years actually open up when I needed it. And I got a firsthand view of the relationship capital value that was in there. And that's the whole game. You don't build relationship capital for the moment you think that you need it. You build it because you have no idea which Thursday is the one it's going to be time to cash it in. So go be a good friend today. Go check on somebody. Go show up for someone who didn't ask. And go be the person who texts first, because we live in a far too fast-paced world, and we have far too many people that we care about and love to just let those days drift by and say, I'll get to it eventually. So don't do it because you need something back, because someday on that idle Thursday that you didn't plan for, you just might need it. So I want to close on this because I know somebody listening to this right now is in their own version of an idle Thursday. Something hits you that you didn't see coming, and you're in the middle of it right now. I'm not going to tell you to stay positive. I think toxic positivity is one of the more useless things that we have, that we offer each other when life gets hard, because it's true. This sucks. This is rough. Everything happens for a reason is really a nice thing to say, and an incredibly helpful thing to hear when you're sitting in a hospital bed. But it doesn't soften the blow. And I think we owe it to ourselves to sit in the pain for a while so that we can truly absorb it, truly understand it, and really understand the impact that it's having. But I think the other part of it too is I don't want to downplay the seriousness of it. What I went through is very serious. It could have been significantly worse. Saying, yeah, it could have been worse is one thing. But I think it's important to be present in the moment and really be honest about the situation. And what I'll tell you this is that the silver lining doesn't always really ask for permission either. It just kind of shows up. For me, it was a meal at the door, or a friend bringing a cup of coffee over in the morning, and we hadn't caught up in years. Sometimes it looks like having nothing to do, but sit still for the first time in years and actually think, which has been difficult for me because I'm a very busy person. So for me to just sit has been very challenging. I'm still in recovery, and I've still got weeks ahead of me before I'm walking, and months before I'm walking normally. I'm not on the other side of this one yet, and I'm very much so right in the middle of it. And even from here, I can see it clearly. The pivot I didn't choose really gave me something the pivot I would have chosen never could have. And sometimes that's just exactly how it works.